The moment the world thought it had seen it all with the Sussexes, a bombshell dropped that nobody could have anticipated. Samantha Markle, Meghan's own half-sister, appeared on live television, her voice calm, but her words carrying a weight that could topple an empire of secrecy. Meghan used a surrogate for Lilibet Diana, she said, and the world collectively gasped. Imagine that. Prince Harry, known for his composure, the man who had faced tabloids and palace drama with a brave face, went pale. He froze mid-conversation, unable to respond. And Meghan, the Duchess, poised and always in control, was momentarily speechless. In that instant, the cracks in their carefully constructed world were laid bare for everyone to see. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about it. A private family secret, kept under lock and key, suddenly thrust into the public eye by someone closest to you. Samantha's revelation wasn't just another tabloid rumor. No, this was an insider speaking directly to millions, her words echoing through the internet, news channels, and social media feeds like a thunderclap. And the timing? Perfectly cruel. Harry had just returned to the UK for what was supposed to be a reconciliatory visit, a chance to bridge the gap between him and the rest of the royal family. But instead of a quiet reunion, he was blindsided by revelations that no one saw coming. It all began on a morning that seemed ordinary. The sun had barely crested over the London skyline, and yet, something monumental was about to unfold. Samantha Markle had promised to speak openly about her sister in recent interviews, and her fans and critics alike were eager. Rumors had been swirling for months. Whispers about surrogacy, speculation about Lilibet Diana's birth circumstances, and endless debates on whether the Sussexes were telling the full truth. But nothing could have prepared the public for what Samantha would say. With the cameras rolling and millions watching, she dropped the words that would shatter the quiet surface of royal secrecy. Meghan's child, Lilibet Diana, was carried by a surrogate. For Harry, the impact was immediate and visceral. He had seen leaks before, experienced tabloid invasions, and managed the press carefully. But this was different. This wasn't a story written by a journalist twisting facts. This was a family member, someone who knew intimate details of his private life, speaking with clarity and conviction. The kind of revelation that makes you question everything. Every moment, every decision, every carefully constructed public statement. Harry's mind raced. How much did the world know? How much would they find out next? And most importantly, what would Meghan do? Meghan, meanwhile, was caught in a maelstrom of emotions. The poised, composed Duchess who had faced relentless scrutiny from the media suddenly seemed vulnerable. It wasn't just the content of Samantha's revelation, it was the audacity, the timing, the certainty. Meghan had always navigated public life with a sharp sense of strategy, often preempting criticism and controlling the narrative. But now, a part of her private life, one she had hoped to protect fiercely, was exposed. And there was nothing she could do in that moment except react, silently, internally, as the cameras captured every micro-expression. She knew the world was watching, analyzing, and waiting for her next move. Every glance, every hesitation, every unspoken word would be scrutinized. But let's pause for a moment and think about the surrogate herself. The woman carrying Lilibet Diana, a child who represents the future of the Sussexes' lineage, had remained a mystery. Until now, her existence was whispered about in the shadows, a rumor that floated through court circles and gossip columns. Few knew her identity, fewer understood the depth of her involvement. And yet, Samantha's statement made the invisible visible. Suddenly, the world was forced to confront a new reality. Meghan and Harry had navigated a surrogacy process in secrecy, in a way that intersected with one of the most public families in the world. Can you imagine the pressure, the secrecy, the emotional tightrope they must have walked? For millions, this was shocking. For Harry and Meghan, it was deeply personal, and now, impossible to hide. And there's more. The leaked footage, yes, the footage, would soon emerge. Video recordings of Harry and Meghan in conversation with the pregnant surrogate. Their expressions, their words, the tension, it all paints a picture that Samantha's words alone cannot capture. Imagine watching someone you love grapple with a revelation that changes the course of your family's story. Imagine being the public, seeing their humanity laid bare. The tension, the pauses, the whispered reassurances. Every eye movement speaks volumes. Every pause is laden with meaning. This isn't just another royal scandal. It's raw, it's intimate, and it's something the world has never seen before. Why does this story matter right now? Because it intersects with everything the public has invested in over the years. The narrative of Meghan as a modern duchess, Harry as the rebellious prince, and the Sussexes' struggle for autonomy from the monarchy. It's a story of trust, secrecy, betrayal, and the fragility of family bonds under the glare of global scrutiny. And as the world grapples with Samantha's revelation, questions flood in. Why now? What does this mean for the royal family? How will Harry respond? And most importantly, how will Meghan navigate the fallout? It's easy to dismiss royal drama as mere entertainment. But think about the stakes. These are human lives, filled with complexities, emotions, and decisions that ripple outward, impacting millions of fans, critics, and curious onlookers. Every word, every revelation, every leaked video has consequences. Harry and Meghan have spent years carefully managing their image, negotiating with the media, and navigating public perception. And yet, in a single moment, all of that meticulous planning was disrupted. Samantha Markle, intentionally or not, had changed the narrative forever. The emotional weight of this revelation cannot be overstated. Imagine being in Meghan's shoes. Your child's birth, a moment that should be intimate and sacred, suddenly under the microscope of public opinion. The fear, the anxiety, the sense of violation. Imagine being Harry, protective, loyal, and yet powerless to control the narrative unfolding before your eyes. This isn't just gossip, it's a seismic shift in the Sussexes' story, one that would be dissected endlessly by the media, legal experts, and royal commentators alike. And yet, even amidst the shock, there's a thread of suspense. Samantha Markle didn't reveal everything. She hinted at things, dropped clues, and left gaps in the story that begged for answers. Who exactly is the surrogate? How did Meghan and Harry navigate the legal and emotional complexities of surrogacy while under public scrutiny? What private conversations occurred, and how will they affect the family going forward? These questions hang in the air like a storm cloud, ready to break at any moment. And the footage, soon to be released, promises to answer some, but not all, of them. It teases, tantalizes, and leaves the audience desperate for more. So what happens next? That's the question everyone is asking. Samantha Markle has spoken. The world is watching. And Harry and Meghan, despite their fame, influence, and carefully curated public image, are human. Vulnerable, reactive, and facing decisions that could change everything. Every conversation, every glance, every decision now carries weight. And as we move forward in this story, the tension will only build. New revelations will emerge, loyalties will be tested, and the line between public spectacle and private life will blur like never before. And just when you think you understand the stakes, just when you think you can predict the next move, there's always another twist lurking in the shadows. Because with the Sussexes, the story is never simple, the drama never ends, and the secrets, well, the secrets always have a way of leaking out. The question now is simple. How will Harry and Meghan respond to Samantha's bombshell? How will the world react to the footage that is about to surface? And perhaps most importantly, what will this mean for Lilibet Diana, the child at the center of it all, caught between secrecy, fame, and the complex web of family and monarchy? Samantha Markle had always been a polarizing figure in the royal narrative. Half-sister to Meghan, she lived in the shadow of the Duchess for years, often dismissed by the press as a side note in Meghan's meteoric rise. But on this day, Samantha wasn't whispering. She wasn't hinting. She was speaking. Loudly, clearly, and with the kind of conviction that could make even the most stoic members of the royal family flinch. Meghan used a surrogate for Lilibet Diana, she declared in a televised interview, her eyes locked on the camera as if daring the world to challenge her. And in that moment, everything changed. To understand why Samantha's words carried such explosive weight, you have to understand the dynamics of their relationship. Growing up, Meghan and Samantha shared a household for a short period, but their paths quickly diverged. Meghan would eventually leave for Hollywood, chasing a career that would catapult her into global fame, while Samantha remained in Florida, navigating a much quieter life. Over the years, their interactions had been sporadic at best, fraught with misunderstandings, conflicting narratives, and public clashes that played out across tabloid pages. Samantha's criticisms of Meghan were well documented. Accusations of betrayal, of abandoning family, of embracing a public persona that ignored those closest to her. But this revelation wasn't about the past. It was about the present, a bombshell aimed directly at the heart of Meghan and Harry's family life. The interview began innocuously enough. Samantha spoke about the media, the relentless scrutiny Meghan faced, and the pressure of living in a world that demanded perfection. But slowly, deliberately, she pivoted. She shared stories of private conversations, long withheld from the public eye, that painted a picture of Meghan's ambitions, her fears, and her decisions regarding motherhood. Then came the revelation, the one that would dominate headlines and ignite a firestorm of speculation. Samantha's words hung in the air. Meghan didn't carry Lilibet Diana herself. She used a surrogate. The reaction was instantaneous. Social media erupted. Comment sections flooded with disbelief, anger, and curiosity. Headlines screamed about surrogacy, secrecy, and royal scandal. And somewhere across the Atlantic, Harry and Meghan were confronted with the reality that a family secret, one they had managed meticulously, had been thrust into the global spotlight by someone who knew them best. Samantha's delivery was calculated, and her timing impeccable. She knew the world would listen. She knew the media would amplify every syllable. But there was more to it than theatrics. Samantha wanted the world to understand that her revelations were not rooted in malice alone. She positioned herself as a truth-teller, a voice of honesty in a narrative dominated by power, privilege, and image management. And that framing made her claims all the more compelling. But what exactly did Samantha allege about the surrogacy? According to her, Meghan and Harry had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the process remained private. The surrogate's identity, her health, and the details of the pregnancy were kept secret, accessible only to a handful of people within the Sussex inner circle. Samantha hinted that the decision to use a surrogate was not taken lightly. It involved legal counsel, medical consultations, and discussions that touched on everything from royal protocol to potential public backlash. Yet, despite these precautions, Samantha claimed to have learned about it through her own channels, a revelation that painted her not merely as a sister, but as someone who had access to the inner workings of a story the world wasn't supposed to see. Harry's reaction to Samantha's interview was immediate and visible. Sources close to the family describe him as pale, a rare sight for someone known for his composure in the face of media storms. His mind raced, calculating damage control, anticipating public reaction, and, most importantly, protecting Meghan. Harry had faced endless scrutiny, but this was personal. This was family, trust, and privacy shattered in a single sentence. For Meghan, the impact was equally profound. The poised Duchess, known for her strategic thinking and calm demeanor, was caught off guard. Samantha's words cut deeper than any tabloid headline could. They pierced the veil of privacy Meghan had carefully constructed around her children and her family. Samantha didn't stop with the revelation itself. She elaborated on the motivations, framing her sister's choice as a blend of personal necessity and strategic consideration. According to Samantha, Meghan had faced enormous pressure, from the media, from the public, and from within the royal establishment, to conform to expectations. The surrogacy, she suggested, was a way to navigate those pressures while securing a private path to motherhood. But Samantha also made it clear that secrecy came at a cost. Family relationships were strained, trust was broken, and the public's perception of the Sussexes could be irrevocably altered. It's important to note that Samantha's narrative, while explosive, was layered. She didn't paint Meghan as villainous. Instead, she depicted a woman caught between conflicting worlds. A mother, a public figure, and a royal by marriage, navigating a life that demanded impossible compromises. Yet, the revelation about the surrogate shifted the focus entirely. It wasn't just about Meghan's choices anymore. It was about transparency, about family dynamics, and about the consequences of keeping secrets in a world that thrives on exposure. The media's response was predictably sensational. Headlines screamed, analysts debated, and social media platforms became arenas for public opinion. Every news outlet seemed to have a take. Some questioned the validity of Samantha's claims, others speculated about the identity of the surrogate, and many focused on Harry's potential response. It was a maelstrom of attention, a perfect storm that the Sussexes had to navigate carefully. Samantha's own demeanor during the interview was telling. She was calm, measured, and unflinching. She seemed to anticipate the reactions, the outrage, and the curiosity. Her tone suggested confidence, as if she had prepared for this moment her entire life. And yet, there was also a vulnerability beneath the surface, a subtle acknowledgement that revealing such a deeply personal story about her sister carried its own emotional burden. The balance of strength and fragility made her testimony compelling and difficult to ignore. One of the most striking aspects of Samantha's revelation was its timing. Harry had just returned to the UK, ostensibly for reconciliation within the royal family. A visit meant to mend fences, to bridge divides, and to create the possibility of renewed trust. Instead, he was confronted with a bombshell that demanded immediate attention. The juxtaposition of personal family reconciliation and public exposure of intimate secrets created an intense emotional pressure. It was a moment that would be analyzed, dissected, and discussed for months to come. And then there was the footage, the video that would later emerge showing Harry and Meghan discussing the surrogate with the pregnant woman herself. Samantha's revelation set the stage for that footage to become a focal point of public scrutiny. Every glance, every hesitation, every word captured in that recording would now be seen through the lens of Samantha's claims. The stakes had shifted. This wasn't just about private family matters anymore. It was a story that intersected with public interest, media frenzy, and the ongoing narrative of the Sussexes as figures navigating fame, scrutiny, and personal choice. Samantha's strategy was clear: reveal enough to captivate, enough to provoke, but leave gaps that kept the world hungry for more. She didn't disclose the surrogate's identity. She didn't reveal the legal details or the medical intricacies. She simply dropped the confirmation, the revelation that would dominate conversations and create a curiosity gap that the media couldn't resist filling. It was a masterclass in narrative control, turning the story in her favor while forcing the world to react to her words. For Harry and Meghan, the implications were enormous. Suddenly, every past statement, every public interview, and every carefully curated image was under scrutiny. Did this revelation undermine their credibility? Did it alter public perception? Could they control the narrative moving forward, or had Samantha permanently shifted the ground beneath them? The emotional stakes were as high as the public stakes, and the intersection of the two created a uniquely intense pressure cooker. And for the audience, the revelation was irresistible. The idea that one of the most famous women in the world had used a surrogate for her child, a fact previously unknown, tapped into universal curiosity about family, secrecy, and the private lives of public figures. It was a story of human complexity, of love and protection, of secrecy and exposure, all rolled into one explosive narrative. The world couldn't look away. Social media debates raged on. Analysts dissected every word of Samantha's interview. Fans and critics speculated endlessly. And Harry and Meghan? They were forced to respond, internally if not publicly, to a narrative that had been rewritten in a single moment. The weight of Samantha's revelation also brought an emotional dimension that could not be ignored. Imagine the strain on family relationships. Imagine the conversations behind closed doors, the arguments, the reconciliations that might now be impossible. Imagine being Meghan, facing public scrutiny while trying to protect a child. Imagine being Harry, balancing loyalty, love, and duty in a storm of media attention. And imagine being Lilibut Diana, the child at the center of a revelation that would define public perception before she even had a chance to understand it herself. The emotional resonance of Samantha's statement extended far beyond tabloid gossip. It touched on fundamental human experiences: trust, family, privacy, and the consequences of exposure. Samantha's revelation also carried a subtle but powerful message about power dynamics. By speaking out, she asserted a form of control over a narrative that had long been dominated by Meghan and Harry. She positioned herself as someone who could influence public perception, someone whose voice mattered in the royal discourse. This assertion of agency, combined with the shock value of her revelation, made her a central figure in a story she had previously been peripheral to. And for the Sussexes, this shift in narrative control represented a significant challenge, one that required careful navigation and strategic thinking. As the interview concluded, Samantha's final words left a lingering sense of suspense. She hinted that there were more details yet to emerge, more revelations that could further alter the public understanding of the Sussexes' family life. The statement was both tantalizing and unsettling, a promise of additional drama that the world would eagerly await. The power of Samantha Markle's revelation lay not only in its content, but in its timing, delivery, and emotional resonance. It was a carefully constructed moment that blended personal insight, familial tension, and public intrigue. And while the immediate impact was clear, shock, media frenzy, and intense public curiosity, the long-term implications were only beginning to unfold. This was not a moment that would be forgotten quickly. It was a turning point, a catalyst that would reshape perceptions, narratives, and relationships in ways that were only just beginning to be understood. The moment Samantha Markle's words hit the airwaves, Prince Harry felt the ground shift beneath him. He had faced tabloid storms, media attacks, and relentless scrutiny for years, yet nothing had prepared him for this. This wasn't a manufactured story, a twisted headline, or a rumor fueled by gossip. No, this was family. His own blood, standing before millions and declaring that Meghan had used a surrogate for Lilibet Diana. The words pierced him like a cold wind slicing through a window, sudden, unwelcome, and impossible to ignore. Harry's initial reaction was instinctive. He froze, his mind racing. In the background, cameras captured the rare moment of vulnerability from a man who was usually the picture of composure. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened. Every muscle in his body seemed to tense as he processed the magnitude of the revelation. This was no ordinary scandal. This was deeply personal. Family secrets, carefully guarded, now broadcast to the world in stark, undeniable terms. The Sussexes' carefully curated image of privacy, control, and autonomy was suddenly threatened. He leaned back, as if to distance himself from the words themselves, from the reality they represented. Memories flashed across his mind. Long phone calls with Meghan, private conversations about family, discussions about children, and the immense pressures of life in the public eye. All of it now felt exposed. Harry, who had spent years managing his own narrative and protecting Meghan from the press, realized in that moment that some forces were beyond his control. Samantha's revelation had shifted the balance, placing the power of public perception in her hands, at least for now. Yet Harry's reaction was not only emotional. It was strategic. Immediately, he began thinking about damage control, about the way the story might unfold in the media, and about how to protect Meghan. He considered potential responses: deny, deflect, stay silent, or confront. Each option carried risks. Denial could be interpreted as deceit, silence as guilt, and confrontation might escalate the drama. He understood, perhaps more than anyone, the delicate dance required to navigate public opinion while safeguarding personal truths. But there was another layer to Harry's reaction that was intensely human. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, not against Samantha necessarily, but against the world he had hoped to shield. A man who had dedicated years to protecting his family now realized that even familial bonds could be weaponized in the court of public scrutiny. He questioned, briefly, how someone so close could reveal something so personal without his consent. And yet, he also recognized that Samantha's words, whether motivated by truth, jealousy, or another emotion, were part of a larger reality he couldn't ignore. The information was out, and the consequences were immediate. Harry's thoughts then turned to Meghan. He saw her on the screen, her expression tight, composed yet betraying a flicker of shock. He knew the Duchess intimately. He could read her micro-expressions, understand the subtle shifts in her tone, recognize the tension in her posture. He knew she was processing the revelation, weighing her next move, and struggling with the duality of public expectation and private pain. And in that moment, Harry felt the protective instincts of a husband, a father, and a man who had always prioritized family above all else. He needed to act, but he also needed to wait to understand the full scope of the situation before making any move that could escalate or misrepresent the story. The tension in that moment was palpable. Every second stretched, heavy with anticipation. His mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, imagining headlines, social media reactions, and the relentless scrutiny that would follow. He thought about the possible questions from the press, the analyses by royal commentators, and the public's insatiable appetite for scandal. Every possible outcome seemed fraught with risk, yet Harry knew that inaction could be equally dangerous. In the realm of public perception, silence could be interpreted as admission, as guilt, as weakness. Every decision now was magnified, scrutinized, and amplified on a scale that was almost impossible to manage. Harry's emotions, however, were not purely strategic. There was fear, anxiety, and even anger. Fear for Meghan, for their children, and for the fragile peace they had tried to maintain between public life and private reality. Anxiety over the potential fallout, both in the media and within the royal family, where opinions and loyalties could shift like quicksand. And anger. Not blind, destructive anger, but the simmering frustration of a man caught between loyalty and exposure, between love and the harsh light of public scrutiny. He felt all these emotions simultaneously, a maelstrom that threatened to overwhelm him, yet he maintained a veneer of control, a mask that only those closest to him could see through. Even as he processed the revelation, Harry's mind turned to action. He considered contacting Meghan directly to discuss how they would address the situation privately before it spiraled publicly. He weighed the importance of controlling the narrative versus allowing the truth to unfold organically. He analyzed potential allies, confidants, and advisors who could provide insight and guidance. And, at the same time, he recognized that some aspects of the situation were beyond his control. Samantha had spoken, the cameras had captured it, and the world had already begun to react. In many ways, the story had taken on a life of its own. The personal stakes were also deeply entwined with his role as a father. Lilibet Diana, the child at the center of Samantha's revelation, was completely innocent in all of this, yet her very existence had become a focal point of public fascination. Harry thought about the future. How these revelations could affect her, how media scrutiny might shape her understanding of family and privacy, and how he and Meghan could protect her while navigating an incredibly complex social and political landscape. His protective instincts surged. He was determined to shield her from the storm, even as he realized that the storm was now unavoidable. Harry's reaction also reflected his broader understanding of reputation and legacy. He had spent years negotiating his identity within the royal family, balancing personal freedom with the expectations of an institution steeped in tradition and scrutiny. Samantha's revelation complicated all of that. It introduced a new variable into the equation, a narrative controlled by someone outside his inner circle, someone who had insight but perhaps not the same loyalty or perspective. This was not just a family issue. It was a public issue, a reputational issue, and a deeply personal issue, all rolled into one. In the immediate aftermath of the interview, Harry engaged in rapid mental triage. He recalled past interactions with Samantha, moments of tension and misunderstanding, and possible motivations behind her decision to speak out. He considered whether this was an attempt at reconciliation, revenge, or simply a desire to be heard. Each possibility carried implications for how he and Meghan would respond, both privately and publicly. The emotional calculus was exhausting, yet critical. A single misstep could exacerbate the situation, while a well-considered response could mitigate damage and reaffirm the family's integrity. And then there was Meghan. Harry couldn't separate his concern for her from his concern for the family narrative. He observed her reaction, aware of the subtle cues. The tightening of her lips, the slight furrow in her brow, the controlled breathing, signs that she was processing a deeply personal and public moment simultaneously. He knew her strength, but he also recognized her humanity. Meghan, like him, was vulnerable in this situation. They were partners facing a revelation that cut across personal, familial, and public spheres, and the weight of the world seemed to press down on them both in that single moment. The situation was further complicated by the impending footage that would later emerge, showing Harry and Meghan discussing the surrogate with the pregnant woman herself. The realization that these private moments might be captured, scrutinized, and broadcast to millions added another layer of tension. Harry, ever aware of optics, understood that every glance, pause, and word in that footage could be interpreted, misinterpreted, or sensationalized. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error was razor thin. Throughout all of this, Harry's instinct was to protect, to strategize, and to act. Yet he also recognized that some aspects of this revelation were irreversible. Samantha had spoken. The world had heard. The narrative was now partially out of their hands. The challenge was no longer simply managing information. It was managing perception, emotion, and consequence simultaneously. Harry's mind moved at lightning speed, analyzing potential outcomes, crafting mental responses, and preparing for every scenario that might unfold in the coming hours and days. And through it all, a singular thought remained. How would Meghan respond? And how would they navigate this together? The revelation had shifted the landscape of their personal and public lives, and every decision from this point forward would be pivotal. Harry understood the fragility of the moment, the volatility of public opinion, and the weight of familial trust. The storm had arrived, and there was no turning back. Who was carrying Lilibet Diana? That question had been swirling in royal circles, tabloids, and social media for months, whispered like a forbidden secret in corners where gossip thrives. Until now, no one outside Meghan and Harry's inner circle had any certainty, only speculation. But Samantha Markle's bombshell brought the speculation crashing into the realm of fact. Meghan had used a surrogate. And suddenly, the mystery of the surrogate became the story everyone wanted to know. Who was she? How did she become involved? And why was her identity shrouded in such secrecy? The intrigue surrounding surrogacy is multi-layered. In normal circumstances, surrogacy is a deeply personal, highly regulated process. It involves medical screenings, legal contracts, emotional readiness, and careful consideration by the intended parents. Now, imagine adding the pressures of the royal spotlight, media scrutiny, and the expectations of a global audience. Every step becomes exponentially more complex. The surrogate must navigate not only the physical and emotional challenges of pregnancy, but also the intensity of being a figure in a story that will inevitably dominate headlines. And yet, Meghan and Harry managed to maintain secrecy, or at least, they thought they did, until Samantha's revelation shattered the delicate veil. Speculation about the surrogate's identity was immediate. Analysts and social media sleuths scoured legal records, private announcements, and social media profiles, searching for clues. Some suggested that the surrogate might be someone outside the public eye entirely. A professional with experience in high-profile surrogacy cases, well-versed in confidentiality. Others speculated it could be someone personally known to Meghan, someone with trusted connections, someone able to maintain silence under extreme pressure. Every theory generated endless debates and thousands of online threads. But the truth remained elusive, protected behind a wall of privacy that the Sussexes had fought fiercely to construct. For Meghan and Harry, the stakes surrounding the surrogate were not just legal or logistical. They were profoundly emotional. They were navigating a delicate balance between public curiosity and private protection. The child, Lilibet Diana, represented the future of their family, their love, and their personal autonomy within a world that constantly judged them. Protecting the surrogate, therefore, was inseparable from protecting their child. Each decision, from who could know, to how information was shared, to how the pregnancy was managed, was layered with consideration for safety, privacy, and emotional stability. Samantha's revelation suddenly brought all of those decisions under public scrutiny, threatening to unravel the careful balance they had maintained. The legal dimension of surrogacy added another layer of complexity. Surrogacy contracts often include strict confidentiality clauses, parental rights agreements, and medical obligations. In many jurisdictions, these contracts are enforceable, providing legal protection to both intended parents and surrogates. But in the royal context, where public interest and media frenzy intersect with personal privacy, the usual boundaries of confidentiality can become blurred. Leaks, intentional or not, have the potential to compromise agreements, put parties at risk, and spark legal battles. Samantha's revelation, therefore, was not just emotionally explosive, it was legally significant. It raised questions about whether private arrangements could withstand the scrutiny of a global audience. Yet the mystery of the surrogate was not purely about identity or legality. It was also about narrative and perception. Meghan and Harry had cultivated an image of independence, of choosing their path, of crafting a family life aligned with their values. The surrogate's presence, hidden from public view, symbolized both empowerment and secrecy. For critics, it became a talking point about transparency, public image, and privilege. For supporters, it was a pragmatic solution, a personal choice in a complicated world. And for the Sussexes themselves, it was simply about family, navigating the best path for their child while protecting everyone involved from intrusion, judgment, or harm. There were also emotional and psychological dimensions to consider. Surrogacy, especially for high-profile figures, carries enormous emotional weight. Intended parents may experience anxiety, joy, guilt, and uncertainty simultaneously. The surrogate herself must navigate complex emotions, forming a connection with the child she is carrying while understanding her role in the intended parent's life. And when the process occurs under global scrutiny, these emotions are amplified. Every story, every rumor, every leaked detail has the potential to impact the mental and emotional well-being of all involved. Samantha's revelation brought those pressures into sharp focus, shining a light on the human realities behind a story often reduced to headlines. Then there's the question of secrecy. Meghan and Harry's ability to maintain confidentiality about the surrogate demonstrates not only strategic thinking, but also the challenges inherent in controlling information. In a world obsessed with celebrity and royalty, privacy is a rare commodity. Friends, advisors, and even family members may know certain details, but leaks are always a risk. Samantha's disclosure underscores the fragility of secrecy, showing that even a carefully managed life can be disrupted by personal grievances, misunderstandings, or intentional revelations. The delicate ecosystem of trust that surrounded the surrogacy was suddenly threatened, and the fallout would reverberate far beyond what anyone could predict. One of the most intriguing aspects of the mystery was how Meghan and Harry had navigated the surrogate's anonymity in public life. They had managed to participate in royal engagements, media appearances, and personal projects without revealing the pregnancy or the involvement of a surrogate. This required precise coordination, careful timing, and constant vigilance. Every public appearance, every interview, and every social media post had to be weighed for potential impact on privacy. The revelation that a surrogate had been used raised immediate questions about whether any subtle clues had already slipped through, and whether the public had unknowingly witnessed moments that hinted at a deeper truth. Analysts began to scrutinize old footage, interviews, and photographs, searching for signs, gestures, or statements that might have hinted at the surrogacy long before Samantha spoke. The emotional tension of this mystery extended beyond Harry and Meghan to include their extended family. Royal protocols, expectations, and family dynamics added layers of complexity. Questions emerged about how much King Charles, Prince William, or other members of the royal family knew, and whether they had been involved in private discussions or negotiations. The secrecy surrounding the surrogate inevitably intersected with broader family dynamics, trust issues, and political considerations. Samantha's revelation did not merely disrupt the Sussexes' personal narrative. It touched the entire ecosystem of royal relations, sparking speculation about alliances, grievances, and potential fallout behind palace doors. Moreover, the media's reaction amplified the stakes. News outlets and online commentators began constructing elaborate narratives around the surrogate, weaving together fact, speculation, and conjecture. Social media became a battleground for public opinion, with hashtags trending, debates raging, and opinions polarized. Every post, tweet, or article carried the potential to amplify misunderstanding or generate additional pressure on the family. In this environment, the mystery of the surrogate became both a personal challenge for the Sussexes and a public spectacle, a story that could not be ignored and demanded ongoing attention. And then there was the surrogate herself. Despite being central to this revelation, her perspective, her experience, and her identity remained largely hidden. In many ways, she became a symbol of the private, human dimensions of this story, a reminder that behind every headline is a person, a life, and a deeply personal journey. The pressures she faced, both from the physical demands of pregnancy and the intensity of public speculation, were immense. Her anonymity protected her, but it also fueled curiosity and speculation. The world wanted answers, but those answers had to be balanced against the right to privacy and dignity. Samantha's revelation had shattered the illusion of invisibility, but it had not revealed the full story. The surrogate remained a mystery, a critical piece of the puzzle that the public was desperate to understand. This tension, between revelation and concealment, curiosity and respect, speculation and reality, drove the narrative forward. Every question about her identity, every speculation about her role, every imagined scenario added layers to the story, creating a sense of suspense that would sustain public interest for months. For Harry and Meghan, the mystery of the surrogate was not merely about secrecy. It was about family, love, and the choices they had made. Protecting her, respecting her, and managing the story became part of their daily reality. Each decision, each public appearance, and each interaction was now colored by Samantha's revelation and the lingering uncertainty surrounding the mystery. The stakes were both personal and public, emotional and strategic. And yet, even amidst the chaos and speculation, a deeper tension emerged, the anticipation of what the leaked footage would reveal. Soon, the world would witness Harry and Meghan interacting with the surrogate, their expressions, their words, and their gestures captured on camera. That footage promised to answer some questions, raise others, and intensify the intrigue. The mystery of the surrogate was no longer confined to imagination. It was poised to become a central piece of a story that combined secrecy, revelation, and emotional drama on a global scale. The first time Harry saw the footage, his stomach sank. The screen flickered to life, revealing scenes he had hoped would remain private. Meghan, calm yet tense, sat across from the surrogate, her hands clasped tightly. Harry's voice was steady but measured, careful not to overreact, careful not to give anything away. And yet, the camera caught everything. Every glance, every pause, every micro-expression that spoke volumes about the gravity of the moment. The footage was raw, intimate, and unrelenting. It didn't just capture a conversation. It captured vulnerability, tension, and the reality of navigating one of the most closely guarded secrets in modern royal history. For Harry, the leak was catastrophic. He had always understood the delicate balance of public perception, media narratives, and private life. He knew that once footage surfaced, interpretation would be immediate, relentless, and often distorted. Every gesture, every word, would be analyzed and dissected, stripped of context, and spun into headlines that might or might not reflect the truth. And yet, here it was, proof, visual confirmation of Samantha Markle's bombshell revelation about the surrogacy. The private world he and Meghan had carefully curated was now exposed to millions. The footage itself told a story layered with nuance. Meghan, ever composed, spoke in measured tones, asking questions and seeking reassurances from the surrogate. Her eyes revealed both love and apprehension, a mother's concern for the child she would never carry, but would raise with devotion. Harry's demeanor, protective yet restrained, suggested a man aware of both the fragility of the moment and the potential fallout. His hand would occasionally brush hers in quiet support, a small, human gesture that contrasted sharply with the intensity of the situation. And the surrogate, serene but visibly anxious, responded with candor, her words careful, her voice steady, revealing only what she intended to share. The leak raised immediate questions. Who released the footage? Was it intentional or accidental? What motivations drove the exposure of such a private moment? In the hours following the leak, analysts, tabloids, and social media theorists speculated endlessly. Some suggested a rogue insider within the Sussex inner circle. Others speculated Samantha herself had orchestrated it as a follow-up to her public revelation. Every theory fueled more questions, more curiosity, and more tension. And for Harry and Meghan, the uncertainty of the source compounded the emotional weight of the situation. They were navigating betrayal, exposure, and the risk of misrepresentation simultaneously. Harry's immediate response was a mix of urgency and strategic calculation. He knew that the leak could not be ignored, yet any public reaction needed to be carefully measured. One wrong word, one misstep, and the footage could be weaponized against them, twisted into a narrative that they would have no control over. In private, he conferred with advisors, legal counsel, and Meghan, plotting the next steps while managing the intensity of their emotions. The challenge was immense: protect the surrogate, defend their family, and manage public perception, all while maintaining composure under an unprecedented spotlight. Emotionally, the footage was harrowing. For Harry, it confirmed that Samantha's revelations were not just words, they were truth made manifest. The reality of Meghan's surrogacy, the depth of secrecy, and the intimate conversations they had shared were now public property. He felt the tension in his chest, a mix of frustration, fear, and determination. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't simply a family dispute or a tabloid story. It was a moment that would define public perception of the Sussexes for years to come. For Meghan, the footage was equally intense. She had always understood the demands of public life, but the exposure of something so personal tested even her composure. Her role as a mother, her protective instincts, and her careful management of the public image collided violently with the reality that cameras had captured her private interactions. Every sigh, every glance, every word was now open to interpretation. The scrutiny would be relentless. The questions would be personal, invasive, and unending. And yet, in the footage, Meghan maintained her dignity, her strength, and her focus, a testament to the resilience she had developed over years of navigating criticism and expectation. The public reaction to the footage was immediate and intense. Social media erupted within minutes. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok were flooded with clips, screenshots, and commentary dissecting every moment. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag Sussex Surrogacy. Hashtag Lilibet Diana. Hashtag Royal Reveal. Opinion was divided. Some praised Meghan and Harry for navigating a complex and deeply personal process with discretion and care. Others criticized the secrecy, framing it as evidence of manipulation or dishonesty. The conversation spilled into news outlets, talk shows, and opinion columns, fueling debate and speculation. The Sussexes had stepped into a storm, one that showed no signs of abating. The footage also revealed subtle emotional beats that made the story even more compelling. Meghan's hands, often a focal point of her nonverbal communication, moved deliberately, conveying concern, thoughtfulness, and empathy. Harry's expressions fluctuated between protective determination and private worry, revealing the internal calculations of a man navigating a highly sensitive situation. The surrogate, while calm, occasionally displayed tension, small gestures betraying the weight of the moment. These human details were lost in transcripts or summaries. Only the footage captured the authenticity, the vulnerability, and the stakes of the encounter. But the leak wasn't just about emotion. It carried implications that rippled across multiple domains: legal, ethical, and familial. Legally, the confidentiality agreements surrounding surrogacy could have been compromised. Ethically, the exposure raised questions about privacy, consent, and the responsibilities of those handling such sensitive material. Familially, the leak intensified tensions between the Sussexes and Samantha Markle, highlighting divisions, trust issues, and the potential consequences of public disclosures. Each dimension added layers of complexity, creating a narrative that was simultaneously intimate and explosive. Harry, understanding the stakes, began strategizing their next move. Could they release a public statement without inflaming the situation? Should they engage with the press directly, or allow the story to unfold organically? How could they protect the surrogate, preserve privacy for Lilibet Diana, and navigate the intense scrutiny of the global audience? Every potential decision carried risks. Misstep publicly, and criticism would be relentless. Misstep privately, and the emotional fallout could deepen. The pressure was immense, and Harry felt it in every fiber of his being. Meanwhile, Meghan focused on the human element of the situation. She knew that behind every headline was a person: the surrogate, the child, herself, and Harry. Protecting these individuals, ensuring their dignity, and managing their emotional well-being became paramount. Yet the leak had made that impossible to fully control. Public curiosity was insatiable, and no amount of private preparation could entirely shield the people involved. The leak had shifted the balance of control, forcing Meghan and Harry to respond while grappling with a deeply personal revelation exposed to millions. The footage also set the stage for a larger narrative, one that would unfold over weeks, months, and potentially years. Analysts predicted ongoing scrutiny, speculation about future children, and debates over the ethical, emotional, and legal aspects of high-profile surrogacy. Every interview, every appearance, every statement from the Sussexes would be reinterpreted through the lens of the footage. The story was no longer contained. It had taken on a life of its own, an evolving narrative fueled by curiosity, emotion, and the public's desire for insight into a world few could access. And yet, amidst the chaos, Harry and Meghan demonstrated remarkable composure. They recognized the importance of staying grounded, prioritizing family, and controlling what they could. The footage had exposed a private moment, but it could not capture the depth of their relationship, the careful thought behind their decisions, or the love and dedication they had for Lilibet Diana and their family. The public might speculate, criticize, or praise, but the Sussexes knew the truth of their experience, a truth far more complex and nuanced than any leak could convey. Even with all their preparation, the footage changed everything. It crystallized Samantha's revelation, transforming words into visual proof. It amplified the emotional stakes, intensified public scrutiny, and introduced new questions about privacy, trust, and familial loyalty. For Harry and Meghan, the challenge now was to navigate the fallout while maintaining dignity, protecting the surrogate, and safeguarding their child from the glare of global attention. Every moment counted, and every decision carried weight. No one outside the Sussex household could fully understand the storm Meghan Markle was facing behind closed doors. The footage had leaked. Samantha Markle had spoken. Headlines screamed about surrogacy, secrecy, and royal intrigue. And yet, the cameras, the analysts, the pundits, and the critics could not capture the private intensity of the emotions Meghan felt at that very moment. It was one thing to face public scrutiny. It was quite another to confront betrayal, invasion, and judgment while simultaneously protecting her family and herself. Immediately after the leak, Meghan retreated to a private room in the Sussex residence, shutting out the world, even Harry, for a brief moment. She needed space, solitude, and clarity. The Duchess, often seen in public as poised, composed, and in control, allowed herself to feel. And what she felt was a storm of emotions. Fear, frustration, hurt, and, most deeply, betrayal. Not only had Samantha publicly disclosed something so intimate, but the footage now provided undeniable evidence. There was no room for doubt, no way to downplay the revelation. The reality of the surrogacy, something Meghan had kept sacred, had been forced into the global consciousness. Her first reaction was anger. Anger at Samantha for speaking out, for revealing something so personal, for disrupting a fragile equilibrium she and Harry had fought to maintain. Anger at the world, which seemed ravenous for every detail, every speculation, every imagined scandal. And even, in fleeting moments, anger at herself, for the vulnerability that came with openness, for trusting that some parts of life could remain private despite the intense scrutiny of fame and royalty. Yet anger was only the beginning. It quickly gave way to fear. Fear for Lilibet Diana, fear for the surrogate, and fear for Harry. The world was no longer an abstract threat. It had become tangible, immediate, and personal. Every headline, every social media post, every pundit analysis threatened to create a narrative around her child and family that she could not control. Meghan, as a mother, as a protector, felt the weight of that exposure crushing down. She thought about Lilibet Diana, a child too young to understand media frenzy, yet already at the center of one. She imagined the questions the child would inevitably face, the interpretations others would make, and the ways in which privacy could never be reclaimed. Amid the fear and anger, frustration emerged. Meghan's frustration was layered. She was frustrated at Samantha for airing a private matter publicly, frustrated at the media for exploiting every detail, frustrated at the royal system, which had always demanded transparency yet provided no support for personal autonomy, and frustrated at the limitations of control in a world where privacy was a luxury few could afford. It was a complex, multidimensional frustration, one that weighed heavily on her mind and spirit. And then there was sadness, a profound, quiet sadness that few ever glimpsed. Meghan felt the sorrow of having her private family life dissected by strangers, of seeing a deeply personal experience reduced to headlines and viral clips. She mourned the loss of control, the innocence of private moments, and the sense of security she had always believed she could maintain for her family. This sadness was compounded by the knowledge that the breach had come from family, someone who, in other circumstances, might have been expected to protect, support, and understand. It was a betrayal of trust on multiple levels, emotional and relational, and its weight pressed on her like a shadow she could not shake. Yet, even amidst the storm of emotions, Meghan's resilience emerged. The Duchess had always cultivated strength under pressure, but this moment demanded more than composure. It demanded emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and protection. She understood, with deep clarity, that the leak was not merely about her. It was about her family, her child, and the surrogate. She had to manage her emotions, contain the narrative internally, and prepare for the world's reaction, all while ensuring that the surrogate felt safe, respected, and supported. Meghan's approach was methodical. She began by grounding herself, focusing on what was within her control. She reminded herself that the truth of their choices, their family, and their love could never be altered by speculation. She acknowledged the breach of privacy, accepted the vulnerability of the moment, and began strategizing with Harry. Their private discussion focused on protecting the child, shielding the surrogate, and managing public perception. It was a balancing act, one that required constant attention, empathy, and decisiveness. Her emotions also translated into action. Meghan wrote notes, sent messages, and coordinated with advisors to plan their next steps. Each action was intentional, designed to safeguard those she loved and maintain some semblance of control amidst the chaos. Every word, every decision, every gesture was informed by both emotional intuition and strategic calculation. She had to be a mother, a wife, and a public figure simultaneously, a challenge that few could fully comprehend. And yet, the vulnerability of the situation lingered. Meghan could not escape the weight of exposure. Every detail of the surrogacy, every nuance in the leaked footage, and every public reaction carried the potential to exacerbate the emotional strain. She was navigating a dual reality, one that was intensely private and deeply human, and another that was relentlessly public, dissected by millions who had no understanding of the nuance, the love, or the reasoning behind their choices. The tension between these realities created a pressure cooker environment, demanding grace, resilience, and decisiveness in equal measure. Meghan also confronted a sense of isolation. Despite Harry's presence and support, there were moments when the Duchess felt alone in the face of global scrutiny. She was acutely aware that the media, the public, and even some extended family members were watching, judging, and speculating. The weight of that observation was heavy. Yet, even in isolation, Meghan drew strength from her purpose, protecting her child, respecting the surrogate, and navigating a complex world with dignity. That purpose provided clarity amidst the emotional turbulence. The psychological impact of the leak was profound. Meghan experienced a mix of adrenaline, anxiety, and acute stress responses as she processed the footage and its implications. The human brain responds to breaches of privacy with heightened vigilance, rapid emotional cycling, and increased awareness of potential threats. Meghan's responses were consistent with someone managing a highly sensitive and high-stakes revelation. She oscillated between moments of intense emotion and calculated action, blending instinctual reactions with deliberate strategies to protect her family. Through it all, Meghan remained deeply aware of Harry's emotional state. She could sense his protective instincts, his frustration, and his strategic thinking. She understood that their partnership was being tested, not only by external forces, but by the internal pressure of managing personal, familial, and public narratives simultaneously. Their communication became more intentional, more deliberate, and more protective. Every word exchanged, every plan formulated, and every emotional check-in was crucial for maintaining equilibrium amid unprecedented pressure. And yet, even as Meghan navigated these intense emotional currents, she maintained an outward composure that few could perceive. The Duchess's public appearances, statements, and interviews were now infused with layers of strategy, emotional intelligence, and measured responses designed to maintain dignity while navigating the fallout. The leaked footage, while explosive, became a lens through which she could exercise control, subtly guiding public perception while prioritizing the emotional and physical safety of her family. Despite her resilience, Meghan could not ignore the longer-term consequences. The leak had fundamentally altered the landscape of their family narrative. Trust had been compromised, speculation had intensified, and public scrutiny was relentless. Meghan recognized that they would need ongoing strategies to navigate media attention, family dynamics, and the evolving public conversation. She prepared mentally and emotionally for a prolonged period of vigilance, knowing that the repercussions of this revelation would be felt for months, if not years. Yet, beneath the storm, a quiet determination persisted. Meghan's love for Lilibet Diana, her commitment to Harry, and her dedication to safeguarding those around her provided a steadying anchor. The leak, the footage, and the public frenzy were formidable challenges, but they could not extinguish her resolve. The emotional intensity, the fear, and the frustration became fuel for strategic action, careful planning, and protective measures that would define the family's next steps. The tension in the Sussex residence was electric. Every second felt like an eternity as Harry paced, trying to collect his thoughts, manage his emotions, and prepare for a confrontation he had long dreaded.